Hello everyone, and thanks for tuning in. My name is Max Besseling, and this talk is about creativity in post-AI times. Let's jump right in. So, as a start, we're starting with a little bit of a disclaimer. This is not going to be a talk about how to use AI. It's not about how to learn Midjourney or talk about AI trends, nor is it about bashing AI companies and comparing them to the devil, even though they probably are. But let's start with a little bit of an overview. We're going to start with a little bit of an intro. Then I'm going to talk about who we are. Then it's going to be about an AI fairy tale. After that, we're going to talk a little bit about expectations and biases. And at the end, I'm going to give you a little bit of food for thought. But let's start with the intro. So who am I? My name is Max Besseling, recently married. This is why there's still Schulz in the end. And I'm a concept artist, art director, and have been working in game development for 15 years. And as a little bit of a side note, I really love world building, and maybe you'll see that throughout this presentation. Also, if you want to follow me and see my work, you can find it on artstation.com/xoco1. And with that, it's the personal introduction, and let's move over to the introduction of the talk. What is this talk about? So this talk is going to be about who we are as creatives. It's going to be talking about what is happening at the moment. It's also going to be going into what we as people, as designers, can do differently and why we should care. And let's dive right in. Who are we? So I want to introduce you to Mark. This here is Mark. He's a cool guy. He's result-oriented, he likes structure, and he also enjoys his personal freedom. And he also really thinks that art should be convenient and fast. But Mark is not the only one that I want you to meet. There's also somebody else. And I also want to introduce you to Mary. This here is Mary, and she's a curious person. She loves the process and experimentation because it really drives her to find creative solutions for problems. And same as we all, she sometimes has a lot of trouble with being patient and trusting in herself. But on the flip side, she also really enjoys the emotional impact that her work has on other people. And from each of these two, there is something that we can learn. So what can we learn from them? On Mark's side, we can learn from him to get a good overview of the result that we want to have and what is needed to get there. Also, to get an understanding on how we can be productive with our time and using our time well. Thirdly, we're also able to learn from him how to be able to break down core requirements of what we're working on and focusing on them, and also understanding what the target audience really needs. Also, lastly, I think it's important that if we don't want to get surprised, it's necessary to check in with what happens around us and understanding where we are in relation to the market and what is happening technology-wise. So it's always worthwhile to checking in with new technology and seeing how it impacts us positively as well as negatively. But what about Mary? What can she teach us? For one, her creativity can teach us how to find unusual answers to our design questions, often by experimenting and iterating. Also, she might have a greater understanding of the human psychology and sees underlying reason why people are connected to art or design. Also, since she likes to do deep dives into topics she cares about, it's a great example for us for being really nerdy and knowledgeable, which is a great trait to have in our field. And lastly, her insight perspective allows us to learn what unique requirements an artwork has or what a target audience requires. So I think people like Mark will always exist. We might not agree with them, but there is some truth in what they say if we look for it. Likewise, with Mary, it seems like she is the real artist, but as a concept artist, we design for purpose, and it can be exciting to also find creative workflow techniques because it's part of the job. So let's start with our next chapter, an AI fairy tale. I prepared a small survey for the audience, but since this is a recorded video, I doubt I see any raised hands in the non-existent audience, but it would have been who here has already tried AI who is using AI in their work regularly and who likes muffins, to see the relation between muffin lovers and AI lovers. So to start this chapter off, I want to check in with what AI is doing really well and what AI is doing not so well. As most of you have probably seen, AI is really good at rendering and lighting materials. So it's a good reference for us to how to apply color, light, and contrast. And it's also very good at speedy and quick iterations. So it's really nice as an early conversation base. Also, comparative image versions is something that AI is doing really well. Especially for marketing, it's super easy to make A/B test scenarios for marketing analysis, because most of these things are actually being thrown away anyway. And it's something where you invest a lot of time, and then just after a couple of days, the test is over and all of your work is being thrown away. The last thing that AI is doing really well is mixing existing influences. So it allows for a wider range of style tweaking, so you can really easily check, do I want something in flat shaded colors? How do I want the contrasts? How big should the black areas be? Should it have outlines? How thick should the outlines be? This type of testing out and iterating is something that in the early process of image development is something that AI can totally be used with. But on the flip side, let's also ask what AI is doing not so well. And here you all know the example of the bad AI hands. The accurate display of complexity is sometimes really difficult with AI. Details seem to lack purpose, and there's a lot of artifacts still. Also, it's really difficult to get something that's historically or culturally accurate. Most of the AI outputs, because it has such a big database and mixes all of these inferences, they are highly inaccurate, they're biased, and often simplified as well. Also, understanding and contextualizing cross-references is something that we as humans are just doing much, much better. We know the background knowledge of what is seen in an image, but an AI doesn't know that, so it's lacking understanding and meaning. Also, ethical, political, and ethnic issues is something that I'm going to go into later. The data set oftentimes just cannot decode sensibilities. It doesn't know of any issues between different ethnicities and any of the more complex understandings of our human society. And lastly, the customization to technical needs is also something that sure will get better with tooling and with time, but to really have something that's hand-tailored to the design and to the specific use case that you have, that's something AI cannot really do that well yet. And also, this is the actual last thing, it's really difficult to find something unexpected outside of the boundaries, because it is limited to its data sets. And here you can really see that oftentimes it just relies on what is the most likely outcome if you just type in a prompt. So let's discuss some of these points, because these biases, they don't come from nowhere. They start with us. To do that, I want to start with a hypothesis. And this is, we really like what we know. We understand the world out there. We see a tree, it's a tree. We see a person, it's a person. So we like to know what it is and put things in boxes. But we also really love to be surprised. And this is something that lately apps like TikTok and other social media are showing. And to understand us a little bit better, let's talk about us. So this is you. And obviously you're influenced by a lot of things. You're influenced by society and culture. You're largely also influenced by pop culture. You're influenced by your family and friends. You are influenced by a lot of media consumption. You're influenced by history, by your hobbies, by the environment, maybe by your education, who knows. And one of the points that's one of the most relevant for us as concept artists is pop culture. And here we're influenced by all of these big franchises, from Pokemon to Star Wars to Super Mario to Harry Potter or to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And all of these things are influencing how we are seeing our own work in relation to all of the other work that's out there. And I want to go a little bit into some of the negative examples that result out of having a global monoculture. One of the most prominent examples is still the depiction of certain jobs largely being performed by white men. Another example is imagining our future as a tech utopia where humanity's problems are solved by means of technological advancements and progress only. And there is, of course, beauty standards. And here I'm not only talking about beauty standards in humans, but I'm also talking about beauty in design in general. As part of this chapter, I want to take you onto a little bit of a journey. And here I want you to calm down and imagine a fantasy castle, high ranking atop the town. It's beautiful. You see banners in the wind, breezing and flowing and dancing. And the smell of lavender fills the air, rushing through your lungs. And of course, this castle also has inhabitants. And I want you to ask yourself what you see in these next pictures. So I generated these with Midjourney, and as you can see, that's a bunch of women, blonde, in fantasy armor. So it is very likely that you guessed the prompt that I was going for. And the prompt is blonde warrior princess. But as part of this chapter, I also want to ask ourselves, what are the expectations and biases that go into designing these things? Is a warrior princess somebody in skimpy chainmail? Is this actually what a warrior princess looks like? So I asked myself, what is actually a warrior princess? And I came to the following conclusion. For me, a warrior princess isn't like the pictures we saw before. For me, a warrior princess is somebody that is rooted in reality, that has historic influence, that is maybe using specific weapons, and that has a particular culture connected to it, and maybe also a particular time connected to them. So from a concept art perspective, it's worthwhile to ask yourself, what makes a princess a princess? What is her status in society? What makes her her as a person? And to answer one of these questions, if we think about princesses, they are the daughters of kings. So they are people that soon will probably be married or carry a child for an alliance. And that is something where I feel like when you're a warrior princess, you make different decisions in your choice of a weapon, because you probably wouldn't go around with daggers onto the battlefield and have somebody stab you in your belly. And all of these things are something that you can and should consider when designing concepts. Because in the end, it comes back to asking what concept art actually is and what the fuck we're doing here. And for me, concept art is a mixture between informing and entertaining. We are visual problem solvers, and our job is to find the best, sometimes the most creative solutions to expressing a concept in a visual way. And this is something that we should always keep in mind when doing every concept, every kind of work for the industry. And I want to leave you off with a couple more slides for food for thought. And here, let's go into a topic that I called acting versus reacting. Because when we work with AI or just generally work, it's important for us to plan ahead and conceptualize our ideas first, and not be just a consumer or a blind recipient to whatever the output of a prompt is. And first of all, it's really the same as you always knew it. We should start with the ideas. We should prepare ourselves and research the topic we're working on. And sure, for the first steps, it might be a cool thing to start the ideation and iteration with some AI help, but it's not necessary. But sometimes it can give some cool results, have a nice impact in terms of colors or contrast, give you a couple nice ideas, and it doesn't need these super polished AI results. Sometimes a super simple old AI might yield something where you find beauty in some of the shapes and can transform it into something later. Following up from the initial ideation iteration phase, there is still a lot of concepting and design work for us to do. And obviously also the rendering. And here, sure, sometimes it does make sense to use an AI tool to do the rendering for us, especially when we're low on time. But then in the next step, we still have to do some touch-ups and manual changes before it goes into the final image. So what can we do differently? And to be honest, some things, but not everything. For example, research. Become a nerd. That's something that's always been around and it's still necessary, maybe all the more necessary now with AI around. Also, learning the craft is still relevant. You still have to use your fingers and your brain, not only for touch-ups and changes, but you really have to know the basic to be able to apply them to something that sometimes is as an image far beyond your own capabilities if AI is doing the perfect rendering. But much more importantly nowadays is developing taste and really understanding yourself and becoming yourself, finding your own style, finding your own preferences, and lastly also explore the boundaries and overcoming yourself and seeing where else you can go with your design, with your style, with your interests, with what makes you and your art unique. Now to the final question. Why should I care? So for one, developing your value specifically gives the outside a direct answer of why to hire you. A potential client can choose from so many different artists, but what makes you you? People don't buy Apple phones because they need a phone. They buy it for the exact feeling an iPhone extrinsically represents, and maybe also for the good camera lenses. And also, the market, as we all know, is overflowing. If we only know how to render really well, then it's going to be difficult with AI around to really be a competition against AI. And all of these other people that are probably rendering more well than you. But on a much more personal level, why we should care is being on top of these things can avoid stress, feelings of depression and anxiety. It can be something where you learn to fulfill yourself and find meaning within your work. Because in the end, creativity and being a creative person and doing creative things means freedom. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, let me know. My name is Max Besserling, and this is where you find me. Thanks a lot.